All right, hello everyone. My name's Dan, and today we're going to be talking about why players cheat in Dungeons and Dragons and how to stop it. So, cheating in D&D, we'll first be going over why players cheat in general, all the different types of cheating, and then how to confront the issue. So, why do people cheat? Well, cheating is prevalent in school, in tests, in sports where people take steroids, in gambling, stock market with insider trading. At the end of the day, cheating is an endemic issue in our lives and is prevalent everywhere we go, right? D&D is no different. And psychological studies on cheating show us that the environment and the rewards matter. So, one example of this was when people were asked to complete a test and then they got $1 for every question they got right. People were much more likely to cheat if the person next to them was cheating, and they were also much more likely to cheat and mark their answers correct if the instructors actually weren't in while they were taking the test and recording their results. So what that means is that if a environment is permissive and allows people to cheat, they will do those calculations in their head and say, you know what, I think it's worth cheating, and then they will do that. And people cheat for certain reasons, right? If there's no rewards and a lot of punishments, people won't do it. So we also have to look at this issue holistically to look at how we can change the environments and the rewards. So D&D is a collaborative storytelling game where no one wins anything. So it seems kind of odd that anyone would cheat in D&D because there's no money, no prizes, no nothing. So why is it that people actually do cheat in D&D? Because we know they do. Well, the first is cognitive dissonance. This is the idea that people have a imagined, identity of their character, and then the dice roll would describe something else. So, for example, a rogue might be a very good, lockpick, and they do a roll, and it's a nat 1 on a lock, picking a lock, and all of a sudden they decide this doesn't make sense for my character to be this bad. So in their mind, they rationalize changing the dice roll to be higher because that would more accurately describe their character. The next is about control. So in Dungeons and Dragons, we can do a lot of things that we can't do in our real life. And I think people take this too far, where essentially they lose control of things in their actual life, and they take those issues and they bring them to Dungeons and Dragons, and they want to control everything because they don't have that same type of control outside their life. And then we get to attention. So players want attention. Although you don't win necessarily money or prizes, you can kind of win this, fake admiration of your peers if you're the one who does heroic acts. So one example of this might be waiting for a dragon to be described as bloodied and near death, and all of a sudden this player, comes out of nowhere rolling a natural 20 and decapitates the dragon and saves everyone. So people are looking for this attention and kind of the positive thoughts from their peers, and they'll use cheating to get that reward. So one of the most common ways of cheating is convenient forgetfulness. So the idea of this is that is that people will forget rules that would negatively affect them. And I consider that a point of cheating, especially when it happens a little too often and right at the most convenient times. So one example of this would be damage taken. You tell them they take 10 damage and they write, 7, or they forget to write it down. Maybe they use too many spell slots or change which spells they use. Or maybe they forget negative effects on them like blind or prone, etc. And this can actually be pretty hard to keep track of in a regular game of D&D if you don't have some tool to help you, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So I actually suggest using a combat and effects table. This is what it looks like. I do use these in my games as well. I think it helps out with a lot of things. First, it helps everyone see where they are in the combat order. So you actually help people speed up their turns because let's say Goblin 3 is going, Kilthgren knows he's next and can kind of start thinking about his turn. But besides that, it shows everyone how much damage they've taken, how much damage all the enemies have taken, and all the statuses and effects, whether it's concentrating on spells or different negative effects like being blinded. And I think you'll be impressed if you use a tool like this, how often people will remember these things because it's out in front of them. So this goes back to the idea of changing the environment. make it easier for people to remember things. So don't give them an excuse to forget things, and use a table like this, and that will help a lot. Next one is fudging the dice rolls, and one of the things I think we hear about most commonly when we talk about cheating in D&D. One example of this would be, consistently high dice rolls, some dubious stats on character creation, or not doing, or just kind of rolling randomly. So for the dubious stats, I have an example of this, which is where one of my games, someone came in with 2 different stat sheets for characters, and I think the lowest roll they got was a 16. And of course, that is just, not really feasible over the course of about 10 different rolls. But that's, what they tried to do. The other one is random rolling. And the idea behind that is someone rolls the dice, gets like a 5, let's say, and says, oh, I want to do an Arcana check on the wall. And then they roll again, they get a 19, and all of a sudden, yes, this roll I would like to use on attacking the dragon. So people will essentially decide what they want to do after they've seen the dice roll. And we can kind of fix all of these as well. So to prevent it, what I always do is just open dice rolling. I use Discord for my D&D, and I ask people to just roll using one of the dice bots in the chat. So there's no hiding dice rolls, there's no covering the dice, there's no picking it up really fast and saying the number differently. You just roll in the chat and everyone on the table can see your rolls. Or you could just have everyone roll in the center of the table and say if the DM doesn't see it, it doesn't count. For the dubious stats, what I would do is just either have people roll in front of you or use the standard array or point buy. I think those are a little more fair anyway. And then finally, I would go with having people only roll dice or only at least count dice if the DM has asked for them. So in other words, if someone just is rolling dice randomly and then tells you what you want to do, DM says, no thanks, player so-and-so, give me a dice roll to do Y, and then they roll. There's no rolling before you decide what you want to do. Now, just kind of a side point here too, I don't think that DMs are absolved of these issues either. DMs should not fudge dice rolls either. I think that if DMs don't want their players to circumvent natural game progression by changing dice rolls, I don't think the Dungeon Master should do it either. And I think that rolling behind a DM screen is, just as bad as a player rolling behind a wall and then not letting the Dungeon Master see it. I think everyone should roll out in the front in the open, and I think all dice rolls should be fair and called beforehand. And I think that helps a lot of players realize that the DM is not cheating and that they don't play by those, silly rules, and no one else should either. Next one is loose interpretations of rules. One example of this would be incorrect spell descriptions or wordings, or different, kind of incorrect ways of reading how special abilities like sneak attack or flanking work. So a way to prevent this is just ask the player, hey, can you read that spell out loud? I don't know how it works. Or, hey, that sounds really strong. Can you read that out loud? And that will eliminate a lot of problems initially, because sometimes people will remember and state the positive parts of their spells, but forget to state when the spell ends or how often the opponent takes a check to remove that effect. And if you just ask the player to read it out loud, you're going to kind of avoid some of those issues. But you can also just check any suspicious rules using D&D Beyond. It's very easy to just type the spell's name in and read it for yourself. But ultimately, you don't want to slow down the game, and one way you can do that is just ask a knowledgeable friend to help you out. Just say, hey, so-and-so, I think, Dave, let's say, is a little new in the game. Would you mind just, helping him out, check his spells, make sure he's doing everything right and knows how things work? Phrase it like that so it's not, aggressive and calling him out as a cheater, but just, have a knowledgeable friend who can back up on those rulings and things like that. Because at the end of the day, as a DM, you have enough to worry about in all the rules that exist. And there's just no real way that someone could know all the different spells, all the different classes, all the different feats, and it's a little unrealistic to ask that of the DM. And so doing things like asking the player to read out their spells or having a buddy help you out are totally normal ways to do that. And it doesn't have to be aggressive at all. So one example, this is actually a mistake I made when I was first using a wizard and I tried to cast the Shatter spell. For whatever reason, I thought it did double damage against inorganic material, but it's actually just that they have disadvantage. And I think that's really important, is that it doesn't come off as aggressive. Just say, hey, I thought that spell worked differently, or can you read that out loud? And then have that person correct it on the spot. You know, no one's going to be offended if you just ask them about that. The next one here is metagaming, and hear me out first because I know this is going to be a controversial one. I think there's a few different ways someone could metagame, and the way that we're looking at here, I think, is undoubtedly cheating. So the first example is reading ahead in a pre-made adventure. So for example, in Curse of Strahd, the characters read tarot cards, which actually determine key parts of the story. If one of the players gets the Curse of Strahd book, looks up what all the tarot cards mean, and discovers all the plot twists before they happen, and then uses that information in their gameplay or tells everyone else about them, that's cheating, and that's awful, right? Another way that someone could use metagaming to cheat is using outside knowledge on creatures, outside game knowledge on creatures, right? So one example that people use a lot, which I don't really like, is the idea of trolls. You need either acid or fire to kill a troll, and the idea is, well, if someone, their character is using those abilities on a troll, they're metagaming and cheating. I think that's a little silly because there's a lot of myths regarding trolls, and I don't think you necessarily need to be a 20-int wizard who gets a lucky roll to know that vampires don't like garlic or werewolves don't like silver. So I think some of those things you can kind of hand wave away. But what I would consider cheating is, let's say someone saw a gibbering mouther, like I pictured on the top right here, and said, oh, gibbering mouthers, they have low AC and only move 10 feet a turn, so if we just run away from it and shoot it with our ranged weapons, it will never hurt us, before they've even met the actual creature or see it go. That's what I would consider cheating, and totally egregious use of metagaming. In that case, I think you can kind of change key elements of the story or edit creature stat blocks to kind of punish the person for metagaming, besides actually just talk to them about the issue too. So if someone came out and said that gibbering mouthers only move 10 feet, I can guarantee you that they're going to be moving a lot more than 10 feet during their next action. So after you've done all these things and kind of tried to change the environment, ultimately you have to come out and just confront the player. But one key thing to remember here is that you need to treat your player like a normal person because that's who they are. And you want to confront the player alone. You don't need to do any public shaming, at least to start. Give them the benefit of the doubt. D&D is a complicated game with a lot of rules, and maybe they're just messing up their rules accidentally, even if it does seem very often. And ultimately, don't assign blame. Just talk to them about how you want a authentic game. Say, hey, I know everyone wants to be cool and do awesome things, but I think Dungeons & Dragons is even more fun when we let the bad rolls happen and we go down those crazy rabbit holes. And I want to experience that with you, and I want to experience that with this group. So please help me out and just keep all the rolls authentic. But if that doesn't work, you can escalate a little bit, and you can call them out publicly and honestly. So I would start just doing some pre-game reminders and say, hey, everyone, I want you to read your spells real quick while I go get some water, just so everyone's knowledgeable about all their new spells and how they work. After that, I would just tell them if they make a mistake again in the middle of the game that's causing issues for everyone else, I would just come out and say, hey, Dave, when you do X, it makes me feel Y, and I need you to do Z. So this could be, Dave, when you tell everyone and spoil the story, it makes me feel like you don't care about the game I'm running, and I need you to allow others to take the lead if you feel like you know what's coming next. And ultimately, if that doesn't work, you may need to remove them from the game or just nullify the results. If they are egregiously, continuously rolling 20s over and over again, their attacks just don't do any damage. Talk with the other players and just say, hey, eventually confront the player and say that, you want to DM one way and they want to play a different way, and those two ways don't necessarily meet. And you think they'd be better off playing with another DM who wants to run the type of game that they want to play. So everyone, thank you so much for coming. That was cheating in D&D with Dungeons & Dragons with Dan. I hope you had a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all soon.